One of the interesting things about being a parent who's going through this is that when we created the organization, we can, as Tanya said, be by parents for parents. And so one of our most important things to do is kind of, what's the definition of a predator? And so our answer is very simple. It's anyone who uses children for sexual gratification. And so this includes the obvious, right? Child rapists, child molesters, but also exhibitionists. The more that we've talked with various victims of sexual abuse, we've learned all sorts of stories that have to do with this very damaging exhibitionist activity. Just as a point of reference, someone that I know well told me that they were, as a child, walking to school. Someone called them over to the car and said, "Hey, I need directions," grabbed their arm, and he was naked from the waist down, said, "Look at me, look at me, look at me," and then let her go eventually, and she ran off to school. So, these types of things happen, and even though that child wasn't physically, sexually abused, that is incredibly damaging, and these types of things are things we need to talk about. So we would lump them in with predators, and we're not scared of using the word. I'm not a doctor or some scholar who's worried about the blowback from usage of the word predator. People who exhibit predatory behaviors are predators. It's pretty simple to us. This is also voyeurs, the peeping toms, the creepy guy who put his cell phone underneath the TJ Maxx changing room and tried to video an 11-year-old girl who I don't know if you guys saw that on YouTube recently, but of course this is something we pay attention to. It was something that I saw, and I thought, that's damaging to that girl, and that's a predator. Even if that guy didn't touch her, that's predatory behavior. Let's call it what it is. That also involves child porn creators and viewers. If you're watching child porn, some child had to be abused for you to get your pleasure, and you're a predator. Also, this is a more uncomfortable one. Older children who sexually abuse or experiment with younger children. That's scary for us. That could be a cousin, that could be a nephew, it could be someone we care about. And if they're exhibiting predatory behavior, that's something that we need to talk about. P.A.X.A parents believe that it's our job to keep all children safe from predators. So it's your child, or it's the children on your kid's soccer team, or it's your niece, or it's some children that you see having a good time at the park and you notice someone who's exhibiting red flag behavior. You pay attention because you're a P.A.X.A parent. You're that type of person. So these are all things that we'll get into throughout my portion of this presentation. But I'd like to start out with some basics. This kind of makes it simple. There are really two types of predator, preferential or fixated child molesters. This is your classic pedophile. This is someone who is just sexually attracted to children, no ifs, ands, or buts. Statistically speaking, as I said earlier, I'm no doctor, I'm no psychologist, but I've read up on it, and I've read 6 different books on this topic since the last time I gave up here and gave a speech. And I've learned a lot about this. You have the preferential or fixated child molester, and then you have the regressed or situational child molesters. And so the majority of child molesters, from everything I've read, again, I would love anyone who has better information to please inform me. I'll put it on the website. It would be great if someone wanted to share more information. But from what I've found is that regressed or situational child molesters are much more common. This would be a dad who molests his daughter. This would be a 16-year-old boy who sexually abuses an 8-year-old boy. These are people who've related sexually to peers at some point in their lives, and a number of different things. Typically, there's some childhood trauma that has gone on with them as well. This is something that we can dive into a little bit later. But what it comes down to is that there's really 2 different types of predator, and we should all know that. There's also 2 approaches, and there's a power predator. This is almost impossible to stop. This is the predator who grabs a child, takes them into a closet, or takes them into a garage, and molests them in an aggressive manner. This is the scariest thing for parents, but it's much more rare. The much more common predator is a persuasion predator. And they typically engage in grooming the child, they groom the family to get access to children, and that is how they take advantage of your trust.